Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us on Less Hustle, More Happy. Today, I am joined with the beautiful Kayla Nelson. And let me just read a little introduction to her life. Kayla Nelson is a holistic life coach, nutritionist, and personal chef, supporting people with chronic illness, Lyme disease, burnout, self abandonment, and major life transitions with an integrative approach to whole body mind healing. She's an advocate and a public speaker, bringing awareness to Lyme disease and invisible illness. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be.
And so, really, let's start out by going back to 2013. And you were healthy, vibrant, training for your first mountain running race.
Mhm.
And then things suddenly shifted.
Yeah. Yeah, I was really active and healthy, full, vibrant life at that time. And I had traveled up to upstate New York into the Adirondacks. And It was an overnight, complete 180 shift. I had brought my trail shoes with me. I was like so psyched on getting to run in the woods up there and really explore and continue my training. And After the first 24 hours of being there, something shifted immediately. It was so shocking. I got off of a kayak and I stepped on the ground, and the ground was no longer stable. It was moving up and down like I was on a trampoline. And that sensation didn't stop for nearly 4 or 5 years. And a whole slew of other symptoms and things started to come on. And at the time, no doctors knew what was happening. I was seeing all kinds of specialists, and everything was turning up. There's nothing wrong with you. We can't find anything wrong with you. And yeah, it was a very disorienting time. And it was a little trippy because I had left for this vacation. It was a 10-day vacation. And when I got back to my regular life here in Colorado, I just disappeared from my friends, and I had to take time off of work and all of that. So it was like this immediate cut off of everything that I once knew, was just gone and shifted.
Wow. So, how long did it take before those symptoms started to first happen for you? And then you finally got a diagnosis of what it actually was?
Yeah, it was strange. I never saw a tick bite. I never saw a tick, but I was definitely in Lyme country. I had no awareness of Lyme really at all. And so I wasn't even thinking about that. And from that day until I got diagnosed, it was almost 2 years later. It was January of 2015 that I got diagnosed, and that trip that I initially went on was in July, yeah, it was almost around this time, July of 2013.
Wow.
So, yeah.
2 years of just struggling with something completely unknown, what was going on with your own body. And I'm sure the struggles that you faced with the traditional medical system and how they were telling you, we can't find anything. Maybe it's in your mind.
Mhm.
What were some of the struggles that you faced with the traditional medical system that you navigated?
Yeah. Um, a lot of that, like, we can't find anything wrong with you. This is either going to resolve on its own, or this is just something you're going to have to deal with for the rest of your life. And I was seeing specialists and neurologists and ENT doctors, and I was being tested for cancer and HIV AIDS, and all of these, everything under the sun except for Lyme. And even in the more Eastern medicine world, I was still not being you know, pointed in a direction that was helpful. Even inside of that system, people didn't know and understand. So it was really just disorienting, and I had no idea what was going on. Um, and it was interesting, and this is kind of how my life has always really gone. Like there has been, even in the worst of moments, there has been this sense after the fact, in hindsight, that the universe is really guiding me, that everything is right where it should be and right on time, even
Mm.
in the worst of moments. And, looking back at my story and the way that things progressed, I was also in holistic nutrition school at the time that I got sick. And it couldn't have been a more perfect time for me to be learning how to support the body on a holistic level. And second to that, one of my teachers was working with a naturopathic doctor in the community that worked with people that experienced invisible illnesses and couldn't figure out what was going on, and people that had been to the Mayo Clinic and still had no answers. He was the guy that people were coming to. And so finally, I went to go see him, and we ran a bunch of labs. And that was when he was like, I think, you need to look at Lyme, and you need to go back to this particular doctor in Denver and ask to be tested. So that's what I did. And that's how I finally got answers. And so I'm thankful that I was in school at that time, and had the connections to get in with somebody that could possibly give me some answers.
And I remember knowing you, through this time too, and watching your body just deteriorate. Your health was just deteriorating to such a level that you weren't able to work. You had a pick line, I remember, and just laying on the couch, and you looked like you might not make it to the next day. Not to
Yeah.
be overly dramatic, but I really felt like your life was a little bit like touch and go almost for a while with Lyme disease.
Yeah, it really was. It was a stark contrast to my life before, and it was dire. I eventually did have a pick line. I had gone through various amounts of treatments, everything from antibiotics to antimalarials, antifungals, to herbal protocols, to injections, and then eventually went to a PICC line because nothing else was really working. And that was over, like almost a 2 year period, that I was doing all these different protocols, working with both Eastern and Western medicine. Um, and during that time, my body absolutely started to deteriorate. I lost 25, close to 30 pounds. I was really just like skin and bones and very pale. And the pick line that I got, it nearly killed me. There were a couple of times had some pretty close to near death experiences. Um, and that, once the PIC line, I had some complications with. I got a blood clot and also frozen shoulder in the shoulder where the PIC line was, and nearly died in that experience. And at that moment in time, I remember laying on the hospital bed when they were, getting ready to pull the PIC line out, and we didn't know if the blood clot was going to move or not, and, either go to my brain or heart. And we all know what happens when a blood clot does that, and it was so surreal. I had about 15 seconds to really metabolize the fact that I may not make it through this experience. And I remember lying there and just, my life kind of flashing before my eyes. And, as you hear people talking about, and thankfully, like, the story turned out well. I'm here. Nothing happened when they removed the PIC line. But at that point, I could no longer use injections as a form of treatment. And so I really needed to look at a different way to heal. And also realizing that these methods were also killing me. It wasn't just killing Lyme, it was also killing me.
Yes.
And it was so fascinating because, my background is in holistic health and medicine in a way. And, here I am, and this is kind of a theme and the reason why I bring it up. Like, here I am, you know, in this medical system, pumping myself full of things that I don't totally fully believe in, and
Mhm.
or like they don't really fully understand how they're working in the body. And and I don't fault myself for those decisions because I'm trusting the medical system, I'm trusting the doctors and the people who have been working with Lyme for a long time. And I guess I say that in like a bigger picture of there's a lot that we don't know, and there's a lot now that is coming out around Lyme and antibiotics, and how they don't always how they aren't always helpful, especially in chronic long-term Lyme. um, and yeah, so I guess to come back to where I was going with that, I had been introduced to this treatment called bee venom therapy almost from the get go, like when I got diagnosed with Lyme. And I had put it to the side because it was very avant garde and very
Mhm.
new. And I just couldn't go there yet. And so after the pick line didn't work, and I was really sort of out of options and also out of money. Um, at that time when I had the pick line, I wasn't working. My physical, mental capacities were not available. And I was dead broke. I remember I had like $50, I think, to my name, and that was it. And no job. I had just had gone through a big breakup where I moved out of the home that I was living in and was living with a friend in a different city. And I had to start a GoFundMe. And that took a lot of bravery to ask for help from the community. And um, yeah, and so at that time, I guess all that to say, like the resources that I had were pretty much non-existent. And but I knew that I needed to continue on my healing path. And so that's when bee venom therapy came in, and I really looked at that more seriously. And I started that treatment probably like 7 or 8 months after the pick line experience. And yeah, I would say that's like a second chapter or leg to my whole healing journey and what has really like brought me here today.
Yeah.
Um,
And with bee venom therapy, I remember you having little crates, little boxes of live bees that would be sent to your house on a regular basis, and your roommate picking them up one by one with the tweezers and having the bee sting your spine or your back area. Take us through what that process was like and any immediate effects that you felt or how it was really changing the course of your life.
yeah, yeah. Um, gosh, it's such a unique, big experience. And yes, so bee venom therapy is working with live bees to treat chronic illness, specifically Lyme. And there's many other things that bee venom therapy works to heal. And So I would have live bees shipped to my house on auto ship every 2 weeks. There's an apitherapy or an apiary. There's a couple of them in the country that work with apitherapy in particular. And so they send out bees to people who are doing apitherapy that are in the last legs of their life. So they're mostly have done all of their hive duties and they're getting kicked out of the hive. So we're not using bees that are taking away from the hive population. Um, and there's a whole process to this. So I won't get into that, for many different reasons. But eventually you get up to a certain amount of stings 3 times a week. And that process for me, I did bee venom therapy for 4 years. For most people, it's like a 2 to 3 year, sometimes 4 year long journey. And for me, my experience of bee venom therapy is it has brought me full healing.
Mm.
I consider myself fully healed from Lyme. And yeah, that journey is not for the faint of heart, but for the people that are really dedicated and, you know, and willing to do that process. It is absolutely worthwhile.
And now you work as an advocate to help other people on their Lyme journey and through this bee venom therapy journey.
Mm-hmm.
What do some of the people who are coming to you? What does that process look like for how you work with them throughout their illness and into recovery?
Yeah. So now I support people starting their bee venom therapy path. So that looks like preparing their body for bee venom therapy. I use my holistic nutrition background and just my own personal journey through bee venom. And so, looking at different pathways as to what can be supported in the body to help the bee venom therapy be more easeful for you. um, and and then working into actually starting the therapy itself. So what are what supplies do you need, and how do I catch the bees, how do I sting myself, what does this process look like in the very tangible sense. And then supporting people on the emotional aspects of the healing process, because it is such an isolating experience to go through. Because of the invisibility of Lyme itself, and then B, you're doing a treatment that not a lot of people you know um, know about. And so that in and of itself can also be scary and isolating. And there are a lot of new experiences because you're working with that particular medicine. And yeah, so I just act as a guide to help people who want to be doing this path, and so they don't have to do it alone. And sometimes that looks like working with their medical team to be an advocate in bringing my voice and knowledge and experience to their medical team so that we can all work collaboratively together, so to make sure that everything is integrative. And because that's energy spent that people that are healing don't need to be spending. That was something that I experienced in my own journey, and I see across the board is the energy that gets spent in advocating for yourself and constantly advocating for yourself. It is exhausting, and that is energy that is so much better used tending to your body and your soul and your heart, and not having to fight the medical system and fight and advocate for yourself and your family and your relationships. Um, so, because a lot of people just don't understand that path. So I step in as, an advocate in those ways to talk with family members about the process and what to expect and how they can be supportive for their person, and also working with their medical team as well.
And I will link all of your information, your Instagram page where you share a lot of information along this journey that you went through, and then as well as your website. I'll link that below so people can definitely find you if they know somebody that is struggling or if they themselves are struggling. Because what you offer is such an amazing part of this healing journey that is completely overlooked by
Yeah.
most people.
Yeah.
And I want to read you something that you wrote. I feel that part of the antidote to what I've grown through is to share about those experiences, the hidden ones of invisible illness, emotional abuse and neglect, mold, the unseen energy and spirit world, identity and sex, and the intersectional relationship with it all. To bring to light the parts of life that are most are too afraid to look at, the things that you can't see and that don't make sense, the ones that someone has to believe just because so the ones that someone has to believe just because you tell them they exist without valid evidence.
Mm.
Your writing is so beautiful that you share on your Instagram page. And what does that mean to you to not have valid evidence, with these invisible illnesses, and what it was like on your journey of the maybe emotional exhaustion, I'm imagining, of explaining to somebody when they look at you and they can't see what's really going on
Mhm.
with the Lyme and the mold and the other pathogens that your body was carrying at that time, and just invisible illness as a whole.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so hard. It's at that validation point, or just having to constantly advocate for yourself that what you're experiencing is really happening. Um, and that's like such the tricky part with these invisible illnesses is you can't see it. You can't see the behind the veil of what's happening in the brain, like that finding words and putting them together in a sentence is like the most difficult thing to do, and remembering the name of the person sitting across from you is just like, like you're hiking a 14er, so difficult to do. And just even to stand up straight and to walk down the street is like the most difficult thing to do. um People don't see that you can't see the effort that goes into just simply surviving, and those things aren't measurable in like a traditional way. It's not like, oh, I see that you have a gash on your arm
Yeah.
and ouch, that must be really painful, or like, oh, it's starting to get better, or oh, that's regressing and not getting better. We need to do something about that. It's like this invisible gash that's happening through your body, soul, and spirit that no one can see, but you are immensely feeling. And and as humans, I think that we really only understand and believe the things that we can see with our eyes. And if we can't see something with our eyes, then we have a really hard time accepting that it is true and valid. And for me, the journey into Lyme on a spiritual sense has really taught me more about the unknown and more about the invisible world, than anything else, because that was, in some ways, outside of like the invisibility of what I was feeling, was
Mhm.
horrendous, right? Like that was like one end of the spectrum. And on the other end of the spectrum, the invisible support that I experienced, either in retrospect or in that moment, was so surreal and so, it's hard to put words to, like, so hard to explain, that I knew that there was something greater than what I was seeing happening in the world around me. And truly, like, that relationship with the unknown and that relationship with the unseen is what kept me alive, honestly. I
Mm,
don't know if I would have stayed here if I weren't getting these little glimpses of hope and reminders, um, and support from nature and the unseen and the spirit world. And, you know, and it takes a, it took me also wanting to see those things, and available to see those things to see them
yeah.
and take them in as support. Um, but yeah, so I kind
I
of
love
lost myself in where I was going there.
No, that was beautifully stated. And really, now that you are on this other side of the physical struggles, I see so much of what you're doing now is that spiritual healing, that
Yeah.
maybe emotional, spiritual healing, that now that your body's recovered, your energy is still catching up to
Mhm.
how much it was depleted over the course of, the past decade with this. And what are some, you're doing so many cool things, from movement therapy and dance to leading these empowering women circles. What are just some of like the modalities that you are using in your own life and you're guiding others on their own spiritual healing journey right now?
Yeah, I would say a lot of somatic focused experiences, meaning experiences of the body and the emotional body, and um, really allowing for that to move, to be seen and accepted and experienced. Um, so that's like one kind of like bubble of worlds that I really am active in my own personal life, and also supporting others in. And the other is more of the spiritual side of life, which I think they're, all connected. Um, but in that world, it's, connecting with nature. I consider myself a yogi, but not a traditional, well, I shouldn't say not traditional. I would say not a Western yogi, more of the traditional um, yogi in the fact that I live in and attempt to live in the rhythms of nature and union with nature. And to me, that is Vedic meditation. I'm a Vedic meditator. Um, and following the Vedic path, the yogic path in that world, and just, kind of communing with nature and using all of the skills and experiences that I've had over the past decade of sort of that spiritual, mystical side of life, and really honing those skills. And so, in working with other people, I use my own connection and tapping into to help guide others in that way, and really ground into their systems and their bodies, and you know support the nervous system regulation, um, and yeah, and I guess that ties into the somatics as well on the other side of things. um, one thing I want to be really transparent about and share about, and I don't know if this is just my experience or if others experience this as well and they're just not sharing about it, but something that I don't see talked about, and I don't really talk about a whole lot either, is the the healing that is still happening on the emotional level and layers of what it was like to go through Lyme.
Yes.
There's a lot of grief that I'm still working through, and there's also a healing process that I am deeply in right now of um, being back in community and being back in relationships, because the journey of Lyme was a very isolating one, a very lonely one. And I also have a history pre-Lyme, of some pretty big traumas and experiences there where I was my own parent at a very young age, and have learned that I am my only everything. And
Mm.
so the experience of being a lone wolf and being overly hyper independent and self reliant has been a theme throughout most of my life. And now the healing work that I am doing is coming back into community and finding um, my own way with that, and safety and regulation, that it's safe for me to regulate with other humans. Whereas before, it wasn't. It was in some ways detrimental to my health because of the relationship dynamics that I were in. And so, gosh, I could talk forever about a lot of this. And I feel like I'm sharing a lot of different things at one time. But all that to say, yes, I feel like I have healed from Lyme, and I am also still deeply healing some of the emotional experiences and isolation that happened during that, nearly 10-year long journey. And so, in some ways it's not like, hurrah, like I did this thing and now I'm just like, the most happy, vibrant, like full of life person. I'm still having rough days,
Yeah.
and working through depression and grief and sadness and deep vulnerability of being seen, because I was so invisible and made myself invisible in some ways for such a long time. And now working on actually being seen is excruciating.
Yeah.
Um, and it's a journey I want to take. And yeah, it takes a lot of guts to do it. And that's where I'm at in this moment.
The vulnerability and at the same time the amount of braveness that you demonstrate is so, it's really inspiring to me. Like, you are the definition of post-traumatic growth
Mm.
with everything that you have gone through in your life, and how you've recreated your life now post Lyme. I guess it never really goes post Lyme because it's still such a part of who you are and who you've been. And it's allowed these new aspects of yourself to just bloom, from the emotional and mental and spiritual healing that you're doing to, as someone who's suffered with my own invisible illness, I resonate with so much of what you said of feeling completely alone and isolated, and at the same time just longing for a typical average day that you felt everybody else was having, of just being able to eat breakfast and enjoy it, or the little things that you take for granted when you have so much pain and suffering from this invisible illness that others aren't seeing.
Yeah.
What have you created in your own life now that, as we talk about the name of the podcast with less hustle, more happy. And really, that happy can be more meaning, more purpose, more joy, more simplicity, more connecting to nature. That happy is something different to everybody. But going full 360 now, what is your life? What are you so excited that you're integrating finally as your physical health has just so immensely improved?
Yeah. Wow, it's a great question. I'm going to take a pause just to sort of feel into that. Yeah, I think for me, it's full integration. Um, and it's interesting when you said happy, it's like I kind of want to take us a little bit deeper with that word happy
Yep.
um, for a moment because, and to me, it's also like the word love. Like whenever I hear the word love, like, oh, is like a state of being, like being in the state of love and being in a state of joy and happiness and gratitude and all of that. I make up in when I hear people using those words, um, that is like a joyous experience that we just need to be in this like uplifted, um, you know, what do they call like high vibe state,
Right.
And for me, it's not a hierarchy inside of what we feel. And in fact, feeling rage and feeling anger and feeling despair and depression are all love. It's all love. And love doesn't have to feel like this big, joyous energy all the time inside of your system, Like those experiences that I was just sharing, like the anger, rage, what have you, are all pathways to truth. And to me, love is truth. And to come back to happy and joy, like to me, those words, what really makes me feel those things is that I am integrating and embodying truth.
Mm.
And truth isn't always a pleasant experience in the moment, but it's very real. And it's not avoiding or pushing down or making small or making invisible any parts of me anymore. It's really honoring the full spectrum of whole experiential living. And so to me, that is what I'm living into now.
Mm.
And that makes me proud of myself. And that in turn makes me happy. Even though
I
in the
love
moment
it.
I may not be feeling happy vibes or happy feelings, I am very proud and happy and in love with my life because it is truthful.
Maybe we should rename it Less Hustle, More Truth. Because, yeah, I fully, I get that. That resonates so hard with everything that you're saying about who authentically do we want to show up as. And there is no good feeling or bad feeling or high vibes only. There's feeling all of it. And it reminds me of that quote from Rumi that every day let a new feeling, emotion show up at your doorstep, and you are the guest house to all of it. And just be present and be awake for it.
Yeah.
And I love that you are cultivating this life that is so true to who you are, and it's so visible with everything that you put out in the world. So thank you so much for joining me today. I hope we can have you back on and do another part of this because there's so much to share about your life. And to see this continuation of how you continue to grow and show up for the world is so inspiring. And is there any any plugs that you want to give out to the world for how people can find you?
Hmm. Yeah, well, thank you, first of all, for the time together. I always love talking with you, and um, yeah, you're just such a special human, and you bring such like depth and fun and joy into the world. And that's such a unique combination. And I just really appreciate you, and also just you asking for this, space and time to share together. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. And yeah, you can find me on Instagram. I think my handle name is I am Kayla Nelson. Um, and my website is sagenourishment.com. You can find me more there as well. And um, yeah, those are great ways to get in touch with me and connect.
Awesome. And I will, again, like I mentioned before, drop links down below in the podcast or the YouTube, however you're getting this information, to how you can get in contact with Kayla. Well, thank you again. And until next time.
Yeah, thank you.